foreign law that is implemented in Jordan.
Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki has bowed to pressure and handed his resignation to the king. His job goes to former Education Minister Omar al Razzaz. King Abdullah has asked him to form a new government and to resolve the standoff between protesters and politicians. The tax reform proposal would raise the number of people paying income tax from 5 to 10%. It's the latest in a series of economic reforms pushed by the IMF. But Jordanians are already struggling under austerity measures. Unemployment is high and salaries are low. This year, the government hiked prices for essentials like electricity and fuel.
I start my work at dawn and stay until sunset every day.
Life now is very difficult. It's not like before. It used to be easier.
Now I can't even afford family expenses. I'm thinking of selling our cattle, but how can I live without them? I don't have a salary and I don't get support from the government. We are barely surviving.
Jordan's economic struggles aren't new and they're not getting better. So it'll be up to Prime Minister Razzaz and his new government to find a way to please both the country and its creditors. And many in Jordan are questioning whether that's possible. Arabella Munro, TRT World.
Let's speak to Dina Rezk. She's a lecturer in Middle East politics at the University of Reading here in the UK. Good to have you with us. So the old Prime Minister stepped down, a new Prime Minister has been appointed. Do you think that's going to help calm the protests?
I think in the short term, certainly it is going to have an effect in terms of giving protesters a sense that their voices are being heard. And of course, this marks something of a pattern in the way that protest and politics work in Jordan, whereby protest is used as a means of exacting political concessions from the king and government. But the question is, in the long term, can a new Prime Minister really make any substantive changes to what are effectively the demands by the IMF and the absence of significant resources in Jordan? Jordan is notoriously reliant upon foreign aid. It's a poor country that has a number of, extremely wealthy initiatives. Amman is one of the most expensive cities to live in, yet you have a poverty rate of 20% and an unemployment rate of something between 20 to 30%, depending on whose estimates you go by. So there is definitely a contradiction.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of economic suffering in Jordan, and a lot of the protesters have legitimate concerns over the cost of living and the standards of living. So what can the new leader do, if anything, to try and ease those concerns and yet have a clear path towards economic reform?
Well, I think it's difficult. I mean, I think certainly the pace of change is important. So giving people a chance to acclimatise, but also I think doing what the authorities have alluded to, which is taxing the very richest as opposed to squeezing the middle classes, because those are effectively the people who are on the streets. So I would say that that is the most promising option available to the new Prime Minister.
Were you surprised by the scale of these protests? Because they obviously seem to be rather more than just about the income tax bill that was being brought in. There seems to be quite a long history of resentment there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we have to see this as the culmination of a much longer process. What I would describe as an existential crisis for Jordan, which is that it's it has a sort of very precarious economy, really, whereby it's entirely reliant upon foreign aid from the Gulf, from the international community. The Gulf is facing certain austerity initiatives, which Jordan is suffering as a result of. There's also the refugee crisis. Over 500,000 Syrian refugees have come into Jordan over the past few years. The Palestinian refugee crisis, recent upheavals and events in Gaza, all of that is going to be sort of coalescing around this sense of unrest and injustice that has been expressed on the streets in the past few days.
Dina, thank you. Dina Rezk there from the University of Reading.